Hi, welcome to this Power BI Quick Start course. So I just want to give you a quick message before you crack on with the course, and I just want to really talk you through what you're going to expect in the course. So first of all, this is a Quick Start course. It's designed to take you from no knowledge of Power BI, apart from having installed Power BI Desktop, right through to having created your first dashboard. The course is split into 5 sections. It's predominantly focused on work order management, so it's a work order backlog dashboard. That said, work orders are a concept that anybody can pick up and understand. It's quite a tangible concept. So it's not just related to maintenance and not just related to reliability engineers. So the course is split into 4 sections. First of all, I'm going to take you through my 5-step process for creating a maintenance or any dashboard. The second part is going to be importing data. So we're going to import some data from Excel. I'm going to talk you through that process. Then we're going to build a dashboard, so we're going to create visualizations, we're going to go and look at calculated columns and measures. You may have heard those terms before, so we're going to talk about both of those. And then in section 4, we're going to look at some interaction, so building some interaction into your dashboard, a slightly more intermediate feature really. And that's going to be looking at filtering and cross-filtering between visuals. It's going to be looking at drill-throughs, so you can drill through to a detailed report that's maybe got a list of different work orders or transactions. And we'll also be looking at these little cool tooltips that pop up and give you a little bit extra information and context when you're looking through your dashboard. In section 4, we'll also look at some basic conditional formatting, so adding colours based on values. And then in section 5, we're going to publish a dashboard. We're going to publish it to the Power BI service, and this is where you can share your dashboard with people inside the company or people external to the company, and that is where it becomes really powerful, because obviously people can then use that dashboard to support their decisions. Okay, so hopefully you're going to enjoy the course. It's going to take you about 90 minutes. I'm going to leave some links below with the full course curriculum or each of the sections, and you can hop between sections, or if you see something that you're going to find particularly useful and really want to kind of understand a little bit more, then you can go to that particular part of the video. So that's all I've got to say, and hopefully you'll enjoy the video. Give it a thumbs up and a like if you enjoy it, and I will talk to you during the course. Hi, and welcome to the first lesson. In this lesson, we will cover the 5 steps of building an effective dashboard. Step number 1 is to define the requirements. It's vital that we understand what business question the dashboard is designed to answer. In step number 2, we'll look at the model. The model is the relationships between different tables within a data model. It includes the calculated columns that are required and also additional measures to answer the business questions. Step number 3 is the build, and we'll look at the 4 stages within this build process. Step number 4 is the implementation. Then this is vital to distributing your dashboard and making sure that you can share it with other people within your organization and also externally. And step number 5 is to allow the dashboard and facilitate the evolution of the dashboard as requirements change and as users use the dashboard and feed new ideas back into yourself or whoever will be administering the dashboard from this point forward. So define. What is the goal of the dashboard? So for this particular dashboard, the goal is to allow the site manager and the department team leaders to quickly understand the following. How many overdue work orders do they have? What is the volume of man hours associated with this work? What is the risk due to the maintenance work that is in backlog? So will it potentially impact safety, the environment, production, or is it just routine work? And finally, who is responsible for the work? Next, we'll look at the model. So the first question we need to answer is what records are required? In this example here, we only use the work order records, so we don't need any additional data. It's a fairly straightforward data model. And where will the data come from? Well, this information is going to come from the Computerized Maintenance Management System, the CMMS. The business rules, well, we need to understand what backlog is. And backlog is where a work order meets the following criteria. The current date is greater than the work order target finish date. So each work order has a target finish date, and if that target finish date is in the past, the work order is in backlog, but the work order also has to be open. So the status is not a complete status. During the build process, we will focus on the following 4 stages. And this is the same for any dashboard. First of all, you need to acquire data. We're going to acquire the data from Excel. Second is the transformation and cleansing of the data. Power BI has got a built-in application called Power Query that allows you to transform the data, carry out some cleansing, and load that data into your Power BI desktop file. Then we'll create the data model. This is a key part of the process and includes creating relationships between different data tables within the data model. But more importantly, for this example here, we'll create calculated columns and we'll create measures. And then finally, we will create visualizations. So these are the reports and the graphs and the tables and the charts that we will add in to visualize the data. So in this example here, there's only a single table, so no relationships are required. The calculated columns we need are: one is in backlog, and that's to flag that the work order is a backlog. Backlog. Second is the number of days past the target date. And then finally we'll need the number of days past the target date grouping. So we're going to group the work orders into those 5 different groups: greater than 100 days, 50 to 100, 9 to 49, 1 to 10, and not in backlog. The measures we require are going to be the work order planned hours, so how many hours have we got outstanding against each work order, the count of the number of work orders in backlog, and the count of the number of hours. The next lesson is to look at visualizing the dashboard. So we're going to create some visualizations, and we'll revisit this section once we start actually building our report. That's it for lesson 1. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll import some data into our Power BI report. So I've opened Power BI here, and I'm going to click on this Get Data, and I'm going to choose Excel. You can see there were a number of different options there. I'm going to go and choose this Work Orders V2 and click Open, so I'm selecting the Excel file. Within here, we can see there are 2 options here. One is for the entire worksheet, and the other one is for a table. Now, I have created a table within this worksheet, and that's a good bit, and that's a bit of best practice there, is to create a table for your data. This allows us to be certain that we only collect the rows that we require and the columns. Then I'm going to click on Transform Data. This will open up the Power Query, and in here we can see that we have all of the columns that we have got in our Excel spreadsheet. And there's a few things we can do here. This is a powerful tool, but there's a few things just to give you a flavour of what's possible. So the first thing we can look at here is the type of data types that have been identified as the best fit for our data by Power BI. A calendar means it's a date type, and if we go to Transform, we can see at the top here, this is the type of data that Power BI has assigned. A 1, 2, 3 is a number, and ABC is a text field. And we can go along here and see that the correct data types have been assigned to each one of these. Now I'm going to carry out a couple of simple transformations. The first one here is remaining hours has been pulled in as a decimal, which is fine, but there's a large number of decimal places here which I don't need. So I'm going to select this, and in the transform option we're going to go to rounding, and I'm going to go round ... and I'm going to select 1 decimal place. That's plenty for the backlog hours. And we can see it's been rounded to 1 decimal place. The next one I'm going to show is if we want to change any of the values. So we want to change this value here. It's called TPS, and I want to call that Total Shutdown. So I'm going to go for this Replace Values, and I'm going to go Replace Values, and we're going to find TPS, and we're going to replace it with Total Shutdown. And let's make it capitals. And then we're going to click OK. And we can see that's replaced that there. Next I'm going to go to Home, and then I'm going to select the option to close and apply. And this will import that data into a data model. And here we have it at the side here. We've got the work orders, and we've got all of the columns that were in our Excel spreadsheet. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we will create the calculated columns that will help us create our measures and our KPIs. To create a calculated column, we click on the three dots here at the top of the table and click New Column. So a calculated column is, like it says, an extra column which is added to the data model, which will be in addition to the columns which you've imported from the Excel spreadsheet. So the first column is going to be a flag to identify if the work order is in backlog. And that is going to be equal to, we're going to use an if statement. And we'll open up this, and the if statement is going to be if, and the work order target finish date. So we're going to use IntelliSense to help us here. We just start typing and it will guess, or will limit the number of fields to choose from based on the text that you've entered in. So if the work order target finish date is less than the data extract date, so the data extract date is the date that this particular information was extracted from the database. Now this would typically be the current date, and you can use a function called today as the current date, but we're going to use the data extract date in this example here. And so if that, and in this, so if that is true, so if the target finish date is less than the data extract date, then we're going to place that value as a 1. If it's not, it will be a 0. And then we're going to finish with the brackets there. So that's going to flag the record as in backlog if the data extract date is less than the target, or the target finish date is less than the data extract date. The next calculated column we're going to create is going to be the number of days in backlog. Days in backlog equals, and we're going to use a function called dateDiff. dateDiff. So dateDiff returns the number of units specified in the interval between the input two dates. So date 1, date 2, and an interval, and it will return how many intervals there are between these two here. And intervals can be days, months, years, quarters, whatever we specify. So we're going to choose days. So the first date is going to be the target finish date. The second date is going to be the data extract date. And the interval is going to be day. Again, we're just going to format this to make it look a little neater. And this is going to calculate the number of days in backlog. How long has the work order been in backlog? The next calculated column is going to be a grouping column. So this is going to be a grouping of the number of days in backlog. So we're going to use the days in backlog grouping. And this is going to allow us to chart or create a graph with the number of work orders that fall into each grouping. And we're going to use a function called a switch statement. So switch takes an expression and evaluates an expression, and then depending on the value of that expression, it returns a result. So we're going to use it in a very particular way in this example, and the expression is going to be true. And that means that the switch statement will choose the first result for the value which is true. So if we start off with the days, we need a comma here to separate the two. We're going to use the days in backlog, and if that is greater than 100, then the result is going to be A greater than 100. The second one is going to be days in backlog again. Day in backlog, I need to go and change that. So if that is greater than 50, then we want the value that's returned to be B. 50 to 100. pause this video and I'll add in the other conditions. Okay, so I've entered the conditions in here, and I've also updated this measure description to days in backlog. So what will happen is this switch statement will evaluate the first expression here. If the days in backlog is for this row here, so that value there for the particular row is greater than 100, then it's going to return this text here, A greater than 100. If that's not the case, it will then move on to evaluate the second statement, the third and the fourth, and it will select whichever one it evaluates as true, whichever one of these is true first. So once it finds one, it will no longer go on to evaluate the other ones, it will just accept the first one it finds as being true. If none of these is selected, then it will return the text other. Okay, so that's now been added in, and the next stage we will do is just have a quick look at this button at the side here. So this button here, these buttons here, this button is to return to the report view, but this button here lets us see the data. So if we're interested in seeing the data which is imported from Excel, let's just go back in here. We can see the data that has been imported from Excel here. And we're just going to check these values here. So is in backlog, and we can see that's a 1 or a 2, and let's just check one of these. So the is in backlog is 0, which means it's not in backlog. The target finish date is the 6th of May. The data extract date is the 31st. So we can see that one there is in the future, so it's not in backlog. Then we can see the number of days in backlog. If it's a negative number, it's the number of days until it goes into backlog. And we can see that grouping is classified it as not in backlog. And I just want to check here that none of these has been classified as other, which is great. And there we have it. We've added our calculated columns to our data model. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, we will create some measures in our data model. So to create a measure, it's very similar to creating a calculated column. We can right click on the data model, the table, and then click new measure. There's plenty of other ways you can click. You can create measures. You can click up here, or you can create it from the data view. But let's just go and create a measure here. So the first measure we're going to create is going to be a measure which calculates the planned hours. So we're going to call this one here planned hours. And a measure is simply a DAX formula that carries out a calculation on a selection of data, or a range of data. So this is going to be the sum. So the DAX formula we're going to use is sum, which essentially takes a column of data, numerical data, and sums it up. And it's going to be the sum of the remaining hours, work order remaining hours. Okay, so it's our first measure. And we'll come to use these in the next lesson, but let's just create the measures first of all. Next, we are going to create a count of the work orders in backlog. So let's go back in here, create a measure. And we're going to create another DAX formula. We're going to call this backlog count. And that is going to be equal to, and we're going to use the function called count rows. So we're going to count the rows. And this count rows takes a table and simply counts the number of rows in the table. So to create a table, we're going to use filter. So a filter returns a table expression. So its input is a table. It carries out an expression or a filter on that table and then returns the results. And we're going to feed that into our count rows function. So the filter we're going to define is going to be on the work orders table, because it is the only table in the data model. And the filter is going to use the is in backlog calculated column which we created earlier, and that should be equal to 1. So we are going to close off this filter, close off this count rows, and press enter. So now we are going to count the number of rows in the work order table which have a is in backlog value equal to 1. Now a feature of measures is that they will be filtered depending on the filter context they're used in, and we will cover that later, and it will become a bit more obvious when we add these measures into cards and into charts and into matrices. The next measure we're going to create is going to be a sum of the hours, and this is going to calculate how much hours we've got in our backlog. New measure, and we're going to use backlog hours, and that's going to be equal to SUMX. So SUMX is slightly different from sum in that its inputs are a table and an expression. So SUMX carries out the expression on each row of the table which is passed into it. So the table we're going to pass in is going to be a filter, and it is going to be the same as above. So we're going to filter all work orders where the flag is equal to is in backlog, and we'll close off that filter, comma, and now you can see at the top here it's asking for the expression that has to be applied to each of the rows within this table which is passed into the SUMX, and we are going to calculate the planned hours. So we're going to actually use a measure that was created earlier. So add that in, and we'll close that off. And this is going to calculate the sum of the planned hours against all the work orders which are in backlog in whichever filter context we place it into when we create our dashboard. Okay, so that is the 3 measures that we need. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we will start to build some visualizations on our dashboard. So before we start, I always like to mock up how I think the dashboard should look. Now, it might not always end up looking like this, but I like to have a starting point. And the principle I've used here is that at the top left hand side, we will put the most important information. And so based on our requirements, I've put total backlog hours and total backlog count, and these will probably be cards with a number here. The next thing we need to understand is the backlog by the criticality, so the risk. So I've put 4 cards along here, and I've dedicated a card to each criticality type. So we've got safety critical backlog, we've got environmental backlog, we've got production backlog, and we've got routine backlog. So this is all work related to safety, work related to the environment, work related to production, and routine work. And we typically read from left to right, certainly in a Western culture. And so I've put the most important things at the top of the page here. And then we've put along the left hand side, we want to be able to see the priority of the work and how old the work is. So we're going to put 2 charts here. One which will split the number of work orders by priority, and one which will split the number of work orders by the age, how long they've been in backlog for. The other requirement is to understand the volume of work which each department is responsible for. So to do this, I've got a matrix in the middle here, and that matrix is going to have the department along the columns and the discipline on the rows, with the number of man hours as being the values in the matrix. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to add in is going to be a card. And a card is a visualization that just displays a single value, a single measure. So we'll add that card in. And we're going to, first of all, resize the card. So when you click on a visualization, you typically get 2 options, 3 options really. This analysis is only available for some visualizations, but the fields are the fields that you add into the actual visualization, and that will change depending on which visualization you choose. So a card has only got 1 field, but if I click on a chart, you'll see it's got an axis, a legend, a value, and it's got some tooltips. So depending on the visualization you use will depend on the fields that are represented inside the visualization. So we want to display the backlog count, so we're going to pull in the measure that we created earlier, and we're going to get a number here, 745, and it's going to use the backlog count there as the default category. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to resize this and carry out a little bit of formatting to make it fit into a dashboard. So under the formatting options, we've got a number of different folders here, and each one of those has got sub options. This one here, general, has got the X and Y position and the width So we are going to create one which is 200 wide by 80 tall. And it is there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the size of these data labels because we're going to make it slightly smaller. So I will go into the data label and we're going to reduce the text size. And we will reduce that to around, let's make it 32. Okay, now I'm going to make this slightly bigger. Now we can drag and drop it like this, just to arrange the size. And then we can go in here, and I always like to make it a little bit more precise. And we will put 110 here. So here we have it. That's the first one there. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to then go and copy that and paste it. So to copy and paste it, we highlight or select the visualization, copy and paste. Oh, I've used the format paste. It's this one here, paste. You can also copy and paste formats as well. So here we have it here. Now I've copied and pasted the same card, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this backlog count with the backlog hours. And you just drag it across, wait until the dotted line appears, and we can see this is the hours. Okay, so that looks fine for just now. In here we have got some rounding going on, so it is 21.76k. So to change that, we are going to go into Format, Data Label, and we are going to change the display units to none. And we can see here that this has got some decimal places, so we're going to change the value to 0 because we don't want to see any decimal places. Okay, so now we've got two cards here. The next thing we're going to do is copy, or we'll keep these cards for just now. The next thing we'll do is we'll insert a shape. We'll insert a rectangle. And we're going to use this as a background. So we'll add it in here. And then once we have that, we're going to click on Format. And we are going to send to back. You can see that that is now highlighted here. Now we can see that these now are highlighted. And we're going to make it slightly bigger. Now this is a point where you would format these, and the next thing we're going to do is add a title here. So we're going to go and insert a text box, and inside this text box we're going to make it slightly smaller. We're going to type in the text total backlog. We'll center that and we'll make it slightly bigger. Let's make it 20, and then we will make it bold, and we will add that into the top of this area here, and just format that slightly. Now the final thing we're going to do with this particular text box is we're going to highlight it, and we are going to get rid of the background, and then we can use the okay. Now, so we've got the total backlog, we've got the backlog hours and the backlog count. So I want to change that description there. Rather than backlog count, I want to change this to be the category to be this word here. It's not the category, it's the label. I want that to be work orders. So to do that, we go to the fields and we change the field name here by double clicking on it, and we call it work orders. It just reads a little bit better. We have got 745 work orders, and then we go for this one here, and we will call this hours. Okay, we know it's total backlog, so we've got that in hours. Next, we are going to We'll come back and we'll change this this color here, but next we are going to import a theme. So we're going to go to View, and we've got options to import a theme here. So the theme changes the colors. So we aren't using too many colors here, but we can see there's still different colors here, and as we flick through it, it does update the standard colors. So we're going to import a theme, so we're going to go, and I have got a theme which I will include in this course, and we are going to browse for themes, and that is a theme, grey matter, that we're going to import in here. Okay, so we have got that grey matter theme. It's created a bit of a border around here which we don't want, so I'm going to click on here, and I'm going to go to line and make the line width 0. And then the final thing we need to do here is we can see there's a line each side of this, and that is actually the background. So we switch on the background and we change it to this color here. Background, and it is here. You need to just figure out which color it is. We'll change it to that color for just now. Okay, so that is the first section where we have added in the cards for total backlog count and total backlog hours. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we will continue with building the dashboard in Power BI, and we'll create another 4 cards, and these cards will be the cards we will use for the work order by criticality. So I'm going to start off by copying this card here, and we'll paste a new one. And while I'm here, I'm also going to change the color here. I'm going to change the fill color to be something slightly darker there. And I'm going to change the background color to be the same. Okay, I want that to be a little bit darker so it stands out. So we've got a card here, and I need to put 3 cards along here, a further 3 cards. So let's start by copying. In fact, before we go on, we need to add a filter here. So we're going to create a card for safety, a card for environment, a card for production, a card for routine work. So to do that, we have got the work criticality, and we're going to add this in to the filter for the visualization. So you can see here we've got the visualization selected, and we've got a filter. In the filter pane, we've got a list of filters that we can apply to that particular visualization. We've got filters we can apply to the entire page, and we've got filters that we can apply to the entire report. And if you've got multiple tabs, then this would be applied to each of the different tabs. So that might be useful if you've got something like a site or a department, and you want to, in one place, select a filter that you can go and tailor each of the different figures for that particular department or site company. So in this one here, we're going to open the filter. There's a few options here: advanced, basic, top, end. We're going to choose basic to begin with. Advanced just allows you to put some additional upper and lower ranges, to define upper and lower ranges. Basic simply asks you to select a value. So let's go in for number 1, which I know is work criticality, which is safety. And then we are going to add in a category label. So, sorry, we're going to add in a title. So the title here is going to be switched on, and we'll call this one safety. We're going to put the title there, center the title, and we will make that slightly bigger, 18. And we'll leave the work orders there. In fact, yeah, let's go for that. So we're ready now to copy that. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to paste it 2, 3, 4 times. And then we're going to use some of the conditional format, some of the formatting options here. So we're going to take the first one, take the second one, and take the third one, and we will add that one in there. Okay, so we can see they're slightly too big to be along here. We can maybe budge that along slightly. And you can see we're using the guidelines. It's still slightly too big, so what we can do is we can hold down the Shift key and we can select the Control key, and we can select each one of these and go to our format options. And if you go, because they are the same visualization, there's certain options that we can apply that will be common to them all. So here's this one here, and we're going to put the width as being slightly smaller at 170. And you can see it's instantly changed each one of these, so it's a really handy function. So we've got that there. We'll move it up slightly so it's slightly offset. Actually, we'll just leave it here. And the next thing we want to make sure is that each of these are a fixed width apart. So we're going to hold Control again, and then we're going to go up to Format, Align, and we're going to distribute horizontally. And it looked like they were. So that would distribute them evenly between the first and the last of the selected visualizations. So the next thing we need to do is just update the filter for each one of these. I'll pause this video while I do that. So that's a filter updated for each one of these, and then we need to change the title to safety, environment, production, and routine. So we go in here, choose title, and we're going to update this title here. Okay, so they've been updated. Next, I want to remove this work orders here. We're going to add a title that's going to tell us it's work orders, so we don't need to see that repeated 3 times. So we're going to highlight each one of these again. And we're going to go into our format, we're going to go to category label, and we're going to remove that category label. Then we're going to add a title in here, so we're going to insert a new text box, and that text box is work orders backlog, work orders by work criticality. So we can see that that is entered there. I'm just going to bold that, make it slightly bigger. Spell check doesn't seem like that for some reason, but let's just move it up there, and we'll center that there. And the final thing we're going to do for these cards is we're going to add a shape as a background. So let's copy this shape here, and we will add the shape in, and we will change the fill to be slightly lighter, and we will change the background to be the same colour. And then we'll highlight this, format, and we will send to back. And here we have it. Okay, just the final one there is to get rid of the background on this, and here we've got it there. Okay, and that is us for the cards related to environmental, production, safety, and routine work. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we are going to add a slicer. So a slicer is a filter which resides on the page. Okay, and before we move on, you'll have noticed I've done a little bit of tidying up here. I've increased the size of this labels here, increased the size of this text here. I really want that to stand out, and I've decreased the size of this text here and unbolded this title. So if you're wondering why it's managed to change, then I've done a little bit of work while we've between the end of the last lesson and this lesson. So let's add a slicer in here. I want to be able to click slicer, and I want to add a slicer in here so that I can select safety, production, environment, and routine. So a slicer is an on-screen filter. So we've got the filters at the side here, but you can also place filters on the screen, and that's what a slicer does. Now, the first thing, I want to be able to select the different types of work criticality. So if I pull that work criticality field in here, and if we make that slightly bigger. And we can see we can select the type of field here, so it's a list, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that doesn't really mean much to the end user. I want to see safety, production, environment and routine. So to do that we need to add another calculated column. So we're going to add a new column and we're going to use the switch statement again. Now the switch statement that we used in the first, when we were creating the groupings for the days in backlog, was the switch statement that was really acting like an if statement. So it selected the first condition, which was true. If you can look back to that video and you will refresh your memory on how that worked. The second way we can use a switch statement is this way here. So work criticality description equals switch, and the first expression we add in here this time is going to be a field or a column. So it's going to be work criticality. So instead of being true, it's going to be work criticality. And you can see here the value. So it's going to look for the value of work criticality. So we're going to give it a value of 1. And you can see it's now moved along and it's asking us for the result. And if it's 1, we are going to call this safety. If it's 2, it will be Envido. And I'll just add in the rest of the text there. So you can see I've added the text in here. So for each of these values here, this work criticality description is going to return the description, the text description that relates to these numbers here. So just click that button there, and we will move to the data view. And we want to just make sure that everything is looking good in this data view. So we'll go along here, and here's the work criticality description, and we can see we've got no others in there. So this DAX here will attempt to match up this value with this value here, and if it doesn't find a 1, 2, 3 or a 4, it will return other, but we don't have any others in there. So let's go back to our view here, and we will replace that with the work criticality description. And here we have it there. Now there's a couple of other things I want to change here. I'm going to go into general, and we're going to put the orientation as being horizontal. And we are going to get rid of this title here, which is the header, slicer header. And we're going to make this slightly smaller here. And then we're going to move that up into here. Okay, so when we select on one of these, we now see that it gets filtered by environment or filtered by production. So the first thing we need to do there is sort this so that safety, production, routine and environment are essentially above each one of the filters. So to do this, we're going to use an option where you can sort one column by another column. So we've got the work criticality description highlighted, and if you go up to format, in fact it's not format, it is, okay, so we've got to highlight that, go up to sort by column, and we're going to sort the work criticality description by the work criticality. And that's going to sort these values here by the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can see it's sorted it almost right, but we've just got this bit mixed up here. So I'm just going to change these around. We can see that sorted now. Now the other thing that is an issue here is if we click on here to have safety, we see these blank values here. So we can go and sort that, and it's very straightforward. So we go into our measure, and let's choose the measure for our count. You can do it for both of these. And what happens is Power BI has recognized that there's no value there, and it's returned this blank in brackets. So we will just simply add in a 0 to the end of this measure here. And we'll do the same for backlog count. We just add a 0 to the end of this statement here. And now we can see if there's no value returned, it's the second condition, or we get the value which is returned and we add 0 to it. So if there's a value that's returned, it will make a difference. If there's no value returned, it will force it to be 0. Okay, so now we have the slicer and we are ready to move on to the next lesson. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you then. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. This lesson we will add some column charts. So we click on that and we will add in a chart. So this chart here is going to be the list of number of work orders in Backlog by priority. So we need the number of work orders, Backlog count, and that is going to be our value. And then we need to split that by work order priority, and that's going to be our axis. So we can see here we've got some information here related to the work orders, and we're just going to tidy this up a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go into the axis, and I'm going to switch off these axes here. So we're going to switch it off, but before we do that, we want to change the type from continuous to categorical. So continuous is used for dates where you want a continuous range, but we want it to be categorical because each one of these is a category. Now we can see it's sorted it by the number of work orders in Backlog, which might be useful sometime if you've got a category that doesn't really relate to each other. So it might be by a discipline or something that isn't really sequential along the bottom here. But this priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, we would actually want to see 1, 2, 3 and 4 regardless of the number of work orders. So let's go in here and we will select sort by work order priority, and we will select this again and we want it to be ascending. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. So let's now go and switch off the title. So I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit here. We're going to say work order priority at the top here, so we don't need it at the bottom there for this. And we can see the backlog count. Well, it's going to be backlog count along the top here, so we don't need the x-axis title either in this example here. So let's go now and scroll down and we'll switch off that title. It just gives us a little bit of extra space. Next thing we're going to do is format the title itself for the actual chart. So we go in and we are going to call this, instead of count, backlog work orders, and we will center that, and we're going to change the text to be this one here. That kind of keeps it the same font as the other ones. Okay, so it's starting to look better now. I'm just going to change these to make them the same colour as that above, sort of grey colour. Now the reason we're using these grey colours is we're going to add some conditional formatting soon, and we want the dashboard to be quite bland. If it's a kaleidoscope of colours, it becomes really difficult to understand where you want to draw your attention to. And as we chatted about earlier, we want to draw attention to problems and opportunities. So we keep it as bland as possible, and then when we use conditional formatting, it springs to life and your eyes drawn instantly to that red colour. So let's choose this value here. That's good, and then we will go in and I want to add data labels, and they look fine. Okay, they've been automatically adjusted depending on the size of the bar chart. The final thing we could do is actually get rid of this. There's only 4 values here. You can see clearly what the values are. Each bar has got the value. There's not much additional value in this being added at the side here. So we will go into the y-axis and we will get rid of that. Okay, so that is the work order by priority. So I'm going to copy that and paste it, and then under here we are going to change that to days and backlog grouping as going to be the axis. And here we can see that we have got these values here. So we want to sort this by the days in backlog grouping, and we want to sort it ascending. Now the other thing we've got here is we've got no work orders there, not in backlog, and we want to get rid of that. So what we will do is we will add a filter onto this, and that's because we forced that 0 to overcome the fact that we're displaying blank values here. We're forcing each category to have at least one value when we are adding in the backlog count. So we need to make sure that we filter this out. So we go in here, and for that visualization, days in backlog grouping, we will select all and get rid of that. Okay, so we've now got the two charts. We'll change the title here, and that title is going to be Backlog Work Orders by Days in Backlog. Okay. Right. So, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, we will add the matrix into the center here. Before we do, I just want to make a couple of changes to here. The first one is that we need to remove this y-axis, because we don't need that. And then the second one is just make sure that they are the same width, and they are slightly more aligned now. Okay, so let's go and click on here. Now one thing to remember is if you have a visualization highlighted and then you want to go and add a matrix, it will actually change the existing visualization of the highlighted visualization to a matrix, or to the visualization you select. So just simply click undo. And that will sort that out. So let's click on a blank piece of screen, and we're going to add the matrix. So a matrix has got rows and columns, and it has got values in the center of these rows and columns. So let us go and add for the columns the department. So here's our drilling, engineering, well, so these are all the departments. And then for the rows, we're going to add the disciplines. And then for the values, we are going to add in the backlog hours. Now, I just want to demonstrate something. So because we've added that 0 to the end of this measure here, it is forcing this matrix to add a 0 in for these values here. So what I've done is I've actually copied this matrix, this visualization here, and I've got a version which has got no 0 added on to the end of it. So we can use the add 0 version for the cards, and we can use the no 0 version for visualizations like this where it's not really going to be appropriate. So if we get rid of that, and we can see that these values here don't have a 0. Now this one does for some reason, but we're not going to investigate that too much just now. The next thing we're going to do here is just format this this visualization slightly. So I don't want there to be any decimal places here, so I'm going to go and put that to 0. So I've put no decimal places for that, and I do want it to be comma separated. I just think it looks a lot neater. I'm happy for the totals. Now it just looks a little bit busy this with each of the different lines, so I'm going to go into the format, and the style I'm going to choose is going to be minimal. Okay, so it's slightly better. And then we're going to go and make that slightly bigger, move that down a bit, and I think that looks okay for just now. We'll make this slightly smaller here, and we can just move it around a little bit, and here we have it there. And the next thing I'm going to do is add some conditional formatting. So let's select the visualization, And we're going to use the built-in conditional formatting. So go to conditional formatting, choose our measure. There is only one measure in here. And we're going to format the background. So by default it creates a heat map, and we do want a heat map, but I don't want the blue color. I want the heat map to be different colors. So we're going to go in and choose the lowest color as being white and the highest color as being red. And click OK. So now you can see we've got this heat map, and we can clearly see that mechanical maintenance is the largest volume of work order hours in Backlog. So let's sort by this value here, and we can then go and make this slightly bigger. So let's go into this matrix again and search for text. And it's going to bring up everything that's got text. So we're going to go, let's test, not text. So we're just going to go and we're going to make things slightly bigger. Got a bit of space here, that's maybe too big. Let's make it slightly smaller. And we can move that across here. Okay, so we've now got a matrix that tells us that for each department how many work orders each discipline within that department has, and we can clearly see that the biggest backlog in terms of man hours is maintenance. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we will look at how we can define how filters interact with the data. So if I click on here, this chart is actually a filter on the other visualizations. So all of these values here have now been filtered for work which is priority 4. Likewise, if I click on here, we've now filtered everything for work that is priority 4 and safety critical work. To take off the filter, you simply click back on it again. Okay, now that's fine, and we do want these filters to work for this visualization here and for these visualizations here and for these ones here. However, we do not want these to be filtered. So how do we deal with this? Well, the first thing we do is we select the filter, and when you select a visualization or the filter here, this is a slicer, we click on Format, and we've got this option here to switch on Edit Interactions. So with that on, we then decide whether we want these interactions to be none or filter. So I've got this one here set to none, and I have got this one here set to filter. So let's see that option there. So we can see that has been filtered by safety and this one hasn't. So let's take that back off again. If I go back in here and select that to none, so for that visualization it will not impact these because we've got switched to none. However, if we click on it, it will impact these. So what we need to do is select the visualization and head to each visualization and just make sure that that is switched off. That needs to stay on. That needs to stay on. In fact, these all need to stay on. It's each of these visualizations, and we switch off the card, these two cards for each of these visualizations. Yeah. So I will just do that. Okay, so we can see now if we click on any of these other visualizations will be impacted. So if I want to see operations and understand how much the work was in each criticality and how much of the work was in each one of these different categories or priorities, we can see that there. However, these have not been impacted. Now the other option we've got here for some of these is we want to either show the value highlighted as to emphasize that value as a total, or we can simply just filter it. So these are the options here that we've got for that chart. So we want to filter this, and we want to filter this, and in here we want to make sure that these are, well, that's filtered by default, which is great. We select this one here, and we want to make sure that that visualization filters this one, and we'll click on here and we make sure that filters that one. So now when we click on each one of these, it will filter the value instead of just leaving leaving all the values and just highlighting the values that we're interested in. Okay, so switch off the interactions, and we have now got the situation where these are all interacting with each other how we would like it to be. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. We've now created the front page of our dashboard. We've added some cards with a total backlog, so no filters are on these cards. We've then added some cards which contain filters so that we can split the work by safety, environmental, production and routine work. We've added some filters here using a slicer, which is an on-screen filter, and we've edited the interaction of that filter there to make sure that it only filters the visualizations that we want it to filter. So there's no interaction with this filter here, with these visualizations here. We've added some charts, and we've added a matrix here with the number of work order man hours in our backlog. The next stage is to create a drill through. So I want to be able to look at these work orders here and understand what the 209 work orders are here, or the 112 work orders here, or what the work orders are that are associated with this man hours here. So to do that, the first thing we need to do is create a new page. Now this page is going to be our drill through page. So we're going to insert a header, and that's going to be a shape. And we will make that shape. And I'm going to format this shape using the line is going to be, so we've done this before, we'll just quickly go through it. 0 line. We're then going to click on that again. We're going to go for the fill, and I'm going to choose a slightly darker color here. Let's go for this color here, and I'm going to choose the background is going to be on, and I'm going to choose that background to be the same color there. In fact, let's go for this one here for the fill. Okay, so we've now got a fill here. The first thing I want to do after that is add a title. So let's add a text box. And we'll call this Backlog Details. And we're going to format that by centering it, making the text bigger. And then we'll just format this box here and just make it slightly smaller. And then we're going to move that up onto here, make sure that's centered. And again, we'll click on here and remove the background. And that's our backlog details. Then we are going to copy the cards from the front screen. So let's go back to the front screen, and I'm going to copy this card here. I'm going to paste it in here because I want to see the values for our backlog, work orders and hours on our drill through screen. So I still want to see the value that has been shown. So I want to know how many work orders we've got in backlog and how many work orders we have got, the hours associated with those work orders. So they're going to be there. So I'll just format these slightly and reduce the size. Okay, so I've just formatted these. I've left a space there, and you'll see why that's the case in a second. Next, I'm going to add in a table. And this table is going to contain the list of work orders that we are going to add. So for the table, it has a list of values, and you simply pull in the list of values that you want to see. So we want the work order number, we want the work order description. So I'll just add these in. So I've added in the list of fields which I want to see in this table, and there's a couple of things we need to do here that I'd like to show you. The first thing we have got is this work order key, this work order number, so it's showing 1 for each one of those. Now by default, when you select one of these columns, Power BI will try to figure out what you want to see based on the numerical type, and it thinks we want to see the work order count. So actually we don't want to see the work order count, we don't want to summarize this value here. So if we choose that don't summarize, we can see that now this is the work order number. The next thing I want to show you is that we have some backlog hours here, and some of these are 0 hours. Why is that? Well, we've pulled in the backlog hours, and remember, that backlog hours is a measure, and that measure is only counting the hours which have got a is in backlog flag equals 1. Now, if you can think back to when we created those calculated columns, if the is in backlog, if the number of the days in backlog is less than 0, it means it's not in backlog. And we can see that these work orders here are not in backlog, and that means we're not counting those values. When it is in backlog, we're counting the value. So there's a couple of things we can do. We could have pulled in the planned hours. However, what this has reminded me is that we want to filter this to only show our backlog. So to do that, we're going to click on a blank space, and I'm going to add in the is in backlog flag to this page. In fact, we could do it to all pages because this is a backlog report. So that filter will now be applied to all pages. Choose basic filter then, select it to be 1, close that down, and we've now got the values that we need. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to do. Next, we need to mark this page as an actual drill through page. To mark it as a drill through, we click on a blank piece of the page, and we then click on the fields option, and we can see this option here to drill through. Now, what we need to add here are the categories or columns which we want to enable a drill through for in the visualizations on the front page. So we want to enable it for department. Now, the first thing it's done here is it's added a button here, so that can be sometimes quite confusing. So we'll just make that button a bit smaller and just configure that button, and that button is to allow us to go back once we've drilled through into this page. So just be aware, because it sort of changed all of the options here. Now it's got the formatting options for this button. So we'll get the button and we will hide the background, and that will just sit there nicely. Now we need to click back on a blank piece of the page, and here we have it back again at our drill through. So the department, users category, which is what we want to select. Then we'll pull in the discipline, users category. So there's a couple of options here. We don't want summarize, we want users category selected. And we want the days in backlog grouping. So these are all the categories that are displayed on the charts on the front page. And we've got work order priority. And that has come through as summarized because it's a numeric value, so we want to use as a category. So department, discipline, days in backlog, grouping, and the next thing we want, yeah, that's fine, that's what we want to see. So this has been activated on this page. We will change the name of the page to work order details. We will change the name of this page to work order, just call it home. And now we've got that drill through page. If we right click on one of these, we will see there's an option here to drill through. And because we've enabled this work order priority, the drill through will allow us to drill through on these 112 work orders. So let's just look at these work orders. We've got 112 work orders, they're for 3,927 hours, and we can see the priority set at 4. And then to go back, we just hold on Control and click back. If we want to see the work orders associated with this maintenance work, we right click on here, drill through, and go to work order details. And here we can see the work orders and the hours associated with this maintenance and mechanical. Now the other you can understand what's been filtered from the drill through because it will auto-populate these fields here with the drill through values. Okay, so you can understand what values are being filtered on this particular page. Okay, so that's just created a drill through. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to apply some conditional formatting to this table here. Now, we did some conditional formatting on the matrix on the front page. Now the conditional formatting we're going to apply here is slightly different. We're going to use a DAX measure to calculate the value that will then be fed into the conditional formatting option. Now we're using that because this is more of a complicated conditional formatting formula. What we want to do is we want to highlight the work orders where the work is scheduled and the condition for work is normal operations. Okay, so that lets us know that the work is scheduled, and because it's normal operations we can go ahead and get that work executed. Now we don't need to shut down the plant like you would for a total shutdown. We don't need to add some system isolations. This is work orders that we can go now and ensure that they are scheduled for the next available slot. And we want to highlight those because remember, when we covered the definition of the requirements were to identify what work can be entered into the next weekly schedule. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is create a new measure. And this measure is going to be the measure that's going to calculate a hexadecimal text string, so a color. So we'll call this conditional formatting. So I always like to start the measures that I use in conditional formatting with CNDF, so that they are easily identifiable. And it is going to be ready to execute. Okay, now the first thing we're going to do is create a variable. So this is us using DAX. It's a fairly complicated DAX expression, but you can use it as a template quite easily to go and carry out and create your own conditional formatting. So the first thing we need to do is we need to understand what the value is of the current row. So we want to understand the work order status, and that is equal to the selected value. So selected value, if we find it in here, selected value, and returns a value when there is only one value in the specified column, otherwise returns an alternative result. So that's going to be fine for us because we've got this will only have one value because we're applying it to each row. And the value that we want to understand is the status, the work order status. And then the next variable is going to be the condition for work. We'll just abbreviate that just now, and we'll call that selected value, and this will be condition for work. Okay, so we've done that. The next variable is going to be the result, and the result is going to be equal to an if statement, and the if statement is going to be if, and we will, so it's a logical statement, so the logical test, we just need to get rid of that. That's going to complain, but never mind, we'll sort it out in a second. Is going to be an AND statement. So we've got an if, and the logical test is going to be AND, and it's going to be work order status equals, and we're going to call that one shed. And the next part of the AND statement is going to be, just tidy this up, the condition for work equals norm ops. So if both of these are true, then the value, so the result if true, is going to be this hexadecimal value here, which I've got, and we need it in brackets, which is going to be E3, so the E83F6F. And then we will put an end to that with no other value there for the if statement, and then we will return, and we will return the result that we've just defined here. Okay, so let's test that just to make sure it's working. Yep, no syntax errors. So we've identified a formula here that will check the row, and if this value here is normal ops and this value here is shed, then we want it to return this hexadecimal value, which is green. Okay, so how do we apply that? Well, we're going to go to the table and highlight the table. And inside this table here, once it's highlighted, we will go to the conditional formatting. Make sure we've got that selected. Go to conditional formatting, and we want to highlight a field. So each field has got different conditional formatting. So let's just go for the work order. And we're going to highlight the background of that work order. And it's going to automatically apply that, that matrix. But we want to choose this option here, field value. So the field value is going to be used to identify it. So we can do a search on our conditional formatting. And here it is, ready to execute. Click on that value there, and we can see, okay, it's red. I've used the wrong value here. We'll go and sort that, but you can see that conditional formatting has been applied when these two conditions are met. Okay, so let's see if there's any other ones. There we go, there's other ones down here. So now we can start to identify the work orders that we can schedule. Okay, so I'll just go and change that to make it green. So I've updated that code there so that it's green. And if you want to apply it to multiple fields, then you would just do the same thing and go in and choose a field value for each of the fields that you are interested in. So the field value is going to be, how's it there? And you could actually apply it to every column in the row, and you would get a row that is completely green. Okay, so that's using DAX to apply conditional formatting. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, we are going to display some help to allow our users to see some additional information related to this dashboard. So the first thing I want to do is create a new page, and we'll call this Tooltip, and we will call this status def. So we're going to show a list of the status definitions. So in the page we want to import an image, and I have created an image here that I am going to import. Now I just used PowerPoint for this, but you can use anything, and we created that image there, and I will go into general, and the width, let's change that to something that's a round number, and let's go this one 450. Okay, so that's our size here. Now we want to now go and change the size of the page to match this. So we go, click on the page, go into this settings here, go to page size. We've got some options here. You can change it to a tooltip, but we're not going to use that option there. We're going to do a custom page size, and the width is 880 and the height was 450. Okay, so we've configured our page here. Next we want to mark this page as a tooltip page. So in the page information again, we go in here and we switch on tooltip. So that's the first stage. We've now got a tooltip page. Next we go into our table here. So I'm going to add a tooltip to this table. I'm going to select the table, go to format options, and at the very bottom here we've got this visual header. I'm going to go and expand this visual header. So that's the header here. And I'm going to scroll to the very bottom of here, and I'm going to scroll again, and right at the bottom here we've got visual header tooltip icon. So if you click that on, you see a question mark appears here. And then if you scroll a little bit further down, let's just click back on to here again. It can be a little bit tricky to get a hold of it. Let's scroll again. We've got this visual header tooltip option, and in this option here we can select what page we want to see. So we're going to select this page here, the page we created earlier. Now it's appeared here because we've marked this page as a tooltip. So that's why we see it in this option here. So once we've done that, we hover across here and that page pops up. So we've got a definition of what the status code or the condition for work code is. And you can put any image in here that you wish. Okay, so this is how you add some help to your visualizations. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, I will show you how to drill through and show the total backlog. So these cards at the moment don't have an option to drill through. And it would be useful for us to be able to see this total backlog figure. And then we could filter within that total backlog figure, and in the details report we can filter by these different criticalities here. So to do that, what we do is go to the work order details, and we make sure that there's no filters applied. So the last time we drilled through was on priority 1, so we need to make sure those filters are off, and this filter here is off. And we will take that filter off, yep. So, in fact, we need to pull in the work criticality description. Yeah, we want that in here. Oh, it's already there. Okay, so we've got these options here. And then we are going to use an option called bookmarking. So we're going to go to View, and we're going to go to Bookmark. And we are going to create a new bookmark. And we're going to call this Total Backlog. And we are going to go into this option here, display data, display current page, and I think everything else we want to just keep, and we're going to update that. And then we're going to go back and create a link to this bookmark on this page here. So let's get rid of this bookmark now, we don't need it. So we will go to Insert, Button, and there's a button for the bookmark. It is there. So we're going to add it to the top corner there. Button text, we're going to add the button text, and we'll call this Total Backlog. Make it slightly bigger, and we can configure the look and feel of this, but I just want to show you how it works just now. So the next thing we're going to do is click back on here, and we're going to assign an action. And the action is a bookmark, and the bookmark we want is the total backlog. So that was a bookmark we just created. We can add an additional tooltip when we hovered over this. Click to view total backlog. So now we've done this, I am going to just quickly remove the background, and if you hold Control and click, we can see this takes us to the total backlog figures. So no filters have been applied. So let's go back and just test this. So we may filter for this one, priority 1 work orders. If I go into total backlog, we can see it's still bookmarking, or jumping to that bookmark, which was bookmarked with no filters applied and all the data being displayed. If you go to the previous one, just to confirm that's still working, drill through, work order details, and we can see this will be filtered for only priority 1 work orders. Okay, so that's really handy to add a bookmark, and it allows us to see the total backlog. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson we will create a context tooltip. So a tooltip is the pop-up that you see when you hover over a value. Now that tooltip is available, if we go into the format options, it's available here. And by default, it will just show the values that are available here. So we've got the work order priority and the work order and backlog. So it's really just showing these two values here. But we have got the option to define a page that will pop up and show additional values or graphs or charts, and it's really quite useful. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go and create a new page. We're going to start this with tooltip, and we're going to call this work order by type. And we're going to add in a graph here. Let's go for one of these cluster charts. In fact, actually, let's go for a stacked. One of these ones. And we're going to show the backlog hours, or actually the backlog hours as the value. And we're going to split this by the work type. So if we go to work type, which is there, it's going to be the axis. And we could tidy this up, but we'll just leave it like that for just now, just to let you see the concept. In fact, let's just quickly change the value, the data colors here, just so they're the same as the other ones. And we can add some values as well. Data labels are on, and we will take off the units. Okay, so here we can see that's the value there, and we are going to now go and change this to be a tooltip page. So we go back to the main, in fact we stay in formatting, click on a blank area within the page, go to page information and switch on this tooltip. So we did this before, and then now we are going to change the page size, and we're going to select the standard tooltip size. Indeed it is here. And once we've done that, we just need to change this graph so that it meets that standard size. So there we have it, and we'll just center that axis there, the title, so the title centered, and we'll change the font family. Okay, so that's our tooltip. We could tidy this up even more, put our commas in here, etc. But let's just see this in action. So we go back to the work order details page. And in here, in fact actually the home page. In here we want to allocate a tooltip to this chart here. So we go into the format, we go to tooltip, and we simply select the page, report page, and that's a type of tooltip, and we select the page. So we've got two pages that are activated as tooltips, and we want this one here. Okay, so now if you hover over here, we will get, now that decimal place doesn't look particularly great, we will get a breakdown of the number of man hours by work type. So let's go and change it slightly, because that's a little bit confusing. We'll go back and we'll change that to the number of work orders. So we go back to count, click on here, and we'll put backlog count instead of man hours. So let's go back to home, and we hover over here and we can see that value there. 132, 23, yeah, so that's adding up to the value. So we'll add it onto here, activate the tooltip, change the type, and we can see it will be activated for this one as well. So we can see of that 109 work orders, some 50 were PMs, 39 were CMs, 15 were breakdowns, etc, etc. Okay, and that can be allocated to any of these visualizations. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and welcome back to the next lesson. In this lesson, I am going to talk you through how you publish your dashboard. So once you've created the dashboard, you will want to share it with people inside and potentially outside your organization. To do this, we publish the dashboard to the Power BI service. So that's a web-based service that allows other people to view your dashboard without having access to the actual file and access to Power BI desktop. So to publish it, we click on this publish button, and you then select the workspace which you want to publish the report to. For just now, I'm going to select my workspace, but there could be a number of different workspaces in here that you can create, or the administrator within your organization can create. So let's go for my workspace. So now it's been published, we can either say, yep, fine, or we can actually link to the Power BI report, which we're going to do. And here we can see it. This report is now opened up in the Power BI service. So I have got a free version of Power BI, so I can't share this report with anyone. You need to have the upgraded version of Power BI, which is the Pro version. However, what you can do is, once you have that version there, you share, and you can see here it's got the upgrade to Power BI Pro. So that will allow you to share this with people inside and outside your organization. So along the left hand side here, we've got the actual pages of our report. And the one thing that you will notice is that these tooltips are shown, as is the drill through. Now, we don't necessarily need these to be shown. So what I will do is show you how you can hide these. So I'm back in the Power BI desktop file, and to hide these, we simply click on I'll just make that slightly bigger to fill the page there. We right click on the tab and we select hide. Okay, so that little icon there will be shown, and we'll do it for each one of these. And that one there. And we will republish this, the current version. And here we can see it's published. And we no longer have that pane at the on the left hand side there, because there is only one page. In fact, and we've came to the wrong page. Now I can see what's happened here. I've actually published it with this page. So even though it's a hidden page, I've published it with that page saved, or the focus on that page. So let's go back to here, and let's publish it with the home page selected. So it's asking if we want to replace the data set, so we will. So we can see the pages are not there any longer because we only have one page that's visible, which is this dashboard front page. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next lesson. Hi, and a very warm welcome to the final video of the course. And well done for making it through this course, this 90-minute introduction to Power BI. Hopefully you have learned a lot within that 90 minutes. It's taken you from not understanding too much about Power BI to building a little bit of confidence in how you can actually build a dashboard of your own. So let's just recap very briefly on what you've learned through this course. The first thing we did was we covered the requirements and the 5-step process for building an effective dashboard. So there was a brief outline of the steps that you need to take to build, or define, build and keep a dashboard maintained over time and allow it to evolve. We then imported some data. We used Excel. During that process, we did some brief transformations of the data using the Power Query tool. Once we had the data in our data model here, we then started to create additional fields. So these are calculated columns. So we created one for is in backlog, and that introduces to a simple if statement. We then went on to create a days in backlog and a days in backlog grouping. So we started to introduce you to some simple DAX statements. The switch statement was used, the if statement was used, and we use a date difference to allow us to calculate the number of days between two dates. Next, we went on to start building some measures. So measures are calculations that are carried out on our data. The first thing we created was a backlog count, and that introduces to the count rows function and the filters function to create a table and then count the number of rows in that table, applying the calculated column we created earlier, which was the is in backlog. Next, we looked at the hours. So this was the SUMX function. So again, we looked at the filter function to filter down a table, and then we applied the SUMX function to go and calculate the total man hours on across each of the rows on that table. The next thing we did was we went and started to create some visuals. So the visuals we started off with was the card visual. So we added in the work order count and the work order hours to our card visual, and we did some customization and formatting of these cards. We then went on to create individual cards using copy and paste, and we learned how to group cards together. And we applied a filter to these cards and started to understand more about how we apply filters and the different types of filters you can get. The visual filters, the page filters, and the report filters. Next, we created a on-screen filter called a slicer. And we created one of these for each of the work criticality types. And in doing that, we learned how you can sort a field by another field. So in this example here, we sorted the work criticality number, or the work criticality description, by the work criticality number. And that let us sort this slicer by 1, 2, 3, and 4 instead of alphabetically. And that gave us a bit of extra functionality there. It meant that we could actually match up the values with the cards above. During this period of time, we also went and imported a theme, and we learned how you can import a theme and change the colours within your report, which is quite important. If you work within an organisation and you've got a colour scheme, you could import that colour scheme as well. The next thing we did was look at bar charts. More specifically, a stat column. In this example here, we don't have a stat column, we've only got one value. And we created the bar charts for the number of work orders by each priority, and the number of work orders by days in backlog grouping. During this period, we also highlighted the importance of making sure that if you're not using a date, we select the categorical data type in the format option here, under the x-axis. So we've just got to make sure that's the case. Next, we went on and created a matrix, which is another type of visual. This time it's a table type of visual, or a data rather than a chart. And we added in some conditional formatting, some basic conditional formatting, just using the standard options that are available within Power BI. And that is a heat map that let us identify really easily the highest number of man hours and the maintenance discipline, or the discipline and the department that is responsible for those man hours. So that allowed us to create our front page. Next, we went on to create a drill through. So the drill through is a feature that allows us to drill through and look at a number of work orders or a detail screen related to a chart on the front page. The main page of the dashboard. Within here we can see we've got the filter for 112 work orders, so that was the filter for the priority on the graph that we selected, priority 4. And we understood how you can configure this drill through and add the categories that you want to activate the drill through for. So we've added it for these categories here: days in backlog grouping, department, discipline, etc. So whenever these categories are on a visual, then you will have the drill through activated and the ability to drill through and look at the detail. Within this drill through, we then went on to use DAX to apply some conditional formatting. So we use the selected value function to allow us to identify which value is selected for the work order status and which value is selected for the condition for work code, and then apply conditional formatting depending on the values of those two selected values. And then this conditional formatting then returns a hexadecimal code, which can then be applied through conditional formatting to any of the columns in the report that or in this table that we choose. The next thing we did is we started to look at additional help that you can provide using tooltips. So the first one we did was a visual level help button, or hover, and that was to provide us with definitions for the work order status codes and the work order condition for work codes. So you can see we hovered over here and that pops up and provides the end user with some additional contextual help. The other tooltip we created was one which allowed us to display measures in the form of a graph, in this example here. And this graph here breaks down the number of work orders into their work type. So we can see here that if you look at priority 1, we can see the highest number of priority 1 work orders that are in backlog at 132 are the PM type work orders. We want to see which type of work orders are the ones which are most overdue. We can see that PM again, closely followed by CM. So that gives us additional contextual information that can be brought up really easily and quickly. The next thing we did was we then went and published our report to the Power BI service. We used this publish button here, and we published it to allow us to use that or share that report with other users. So here we have it, the final report published to the Power BI service, on full screen, ready to use, ready to interact with, ready to drill through and see the tooltips in action, everything working. And you now have a fully functional dashboard that you can use in your organization. Hopefully you've learned lots of tips here, lots of information. It's been a whistle-stop tour. I've tried to be concise. I've tried to be to the point. I've tried to focus on the things I think are useful for somebody as they are beginning their Power BI learning journey. I'd like to thank you for listening to the course. Thank you for sticking with me. If you want to learn more about Power BI, then visit my website, which is effectivedashboards.com. I will leave a discount for the other courses that I have created in the resources section for this course. And I look forward to talking to you in a future course.